The final bus of Route 375. The story happened on the bleak night of November 14, 1995, in Beijing, China. An old man, some also say an old woman, was waiting at a bus stop at the midnight, picking up a conversation with the only other person at the stop, who was a quiet young gentleman. When the midnight bus 375, the last bus for Route 375 from the Yuan-Menghuan bus terminus, finally came, they both boarded on it. The old man took a seat near the front of the bus while the young man sat a couple of rows behind him. There was no other passenger along with them than the driver and a decent lady ticket collector. After a while, the driver spotted two shadows by the side of the road, waving at the bus. The driver stopped, and when the doors opened, 3 people got on. There were 2 men who were supporting a third man between them, holding him up by his shoulders. The man in the middle was looking disheveled and his head was bowed, so nobody could see his face, and there was a dismal, calm atmosphere inside the bus. Shortly after that, the old man picked up a fight with the young man under some silly pretext of stealing his wallet. The altercation escalated and the bus driver forced them both off the bus. When they got off and the bus zoomed away, the old man was no longer angry, and he told the young man that he had saved their lives. Because the new 3 passengers did not have feet and were floating, they were not living people, he said. After that, they went to the nearest police station to report this event, but nobody believed them. But the very next day, the bus company issued a statement: "Last night, the final bus for Route 375 has vanished along with the driver and ticket lady." The police immediately chased down that old man and the young man, who were assumed to be mentally ill when they tried to raise the alarm earlier, and they were both interviewed on the news. On the 3rd day, the police revealed the allegedly missing bus in a water reservoir about 100 kilometers away from its destination, Xiangshan, or so-called Fragrant Hills. Inside the bus, there were 3 very badly decomposed corpses, and the mysteries surrounding this finding included: the bus did not have enough petrol for it to keep going that far after a whole day's worth of travel. The police found that the petrol tank was filled with fresh blood instead of petrol. The corpses found were too decomposed for just 48 hours, even if it was summer. The process of decomposition would not be this quick. An autopsy confirmed that there has been no intentional meddling with the bodies. The police went through all the security camera tapes set up for the various entrances to access the reservoir, but have found nothing out of ordinary. To this day, it remains an unsolved mystery. My mother is still scared of the dark. I am 16 and my mother is in her 40s, and she divorced my father on amicable, mutual and respectful decisions, and they still talk to each other. Life is good. Apart from that, my mother is still afraid of the dark, and she will still at midnight jump into my bed shivering in fear because of so-called monsters under her bed. This is why my father divorced her, and she understood this because she herself would divorce a person who had these sorts of characteristics. Even though she is my mother and I do care for her, I am sick of her jumping into my bed all scared and shivering. I am also the one who checks under her bed. I would like to stay at my father's house to catch a break from my mother's fears of monsters under her bed and also her fears of the dark. Even when she doesn't scream of monsters, just her fear of the dark makes her run towards my room. My mother has even tried manipulative tactics to make me accept her fears of monsters and the dark and her ways of running into my room to hide in my bed next to me, by threatening me to kick me out when I am 18. She also tried to emotionally shame me into accepting her ways by saying how she gave birth to me. Then one day when she came rushing into my bedroom and hiding under my duvet, I couldn't take it anymore and I told her that she needed to go back into her bedroom. My mother started crying and she slowly and bravely walked back to her room, and then 10 minutes later, I heard her scream. I ran to her bed and she wasn't there anymore. In that moment I missed her coming into my room all scared and jumping into my bed. My divorced father was still single and living in a rented flat, and he is now back at the house. My father then started sleeping in my mother's bedroom, and exactly at midnight, my father came running into my bedroom and started hiding under my duvet next to me. This website would like to use your current location. I got a text from a number I didn't recognize that said ha 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 and a link. I clicked the link, it opened in Safari, and prompted me to use my current location. I allowed. Page was blank. Like 2 hours later I saw lightning or something from outside. Turned, nothing, Didn't really think about it. Kind of put two and two together the next day. I went back to that website. It was a picture of the back of my head watching TV, with a flash reflection in the middle. I went back to that text but it was gone, deleted. The most recent picture taken in my phone was a video, though, taken after 3 a.m., I was long asleep. My bill online confirms a rich media text was sent to that number I didn't recognize at that time. The video is a walkthrough of my house, showing the front door, sliding back door, and big windows, including a close-up on the lock of the biggest window. My house key was missing off my keychain when I looked later. My shit is freaked. Birmingham 1969. This is a story about two young men from Birmingham, UK, and it happened in the year 1969. I'm not claiming that this is exactly how it happened down to the last detail, but still, this is, more or less, a true story. Terence, a man from the working class, around the age of 20, had been interested in the occult for some time back then. He had painted his room in matte black and decorated it with inverted crosses, pentagrams, and various pictures of demons and Satan himself. He read and wrote about dark cults, the supernatural, and about everything that is evil and unholy. His mate, John, knew this well, when he stumbled upon a book that was obviously written at least a couple hundreds of years ago. In Latin. He went straight to Terence and gave it to him as a present. None of them had any idea what it was about, since they did not understand Latin, but it was obvious from the appearance and the sound of some of the words written in it, that it had to have something to do with black magic or witchcraft. Terence was so amazed by this book that he forgot to ask John where he had found it. He spent the whole evening trying to figure what this book could teach him, but even after a couple of hours of intense studying, he still could not find a clue. Frustrated and exhausted, he put the book on his desk and simply went to sleep. He awakened in the middle of the night, not sure what it was that had interrupted his deep slumber. And then he saw it. On the end of his bed, barely visible in the dark of his room, stood an enormous black shape with fiery red eyes. And it pointed at him. His natural reaction was to switch on the light, which he did, and the thing was gone. And as it turned out, so was the book John had given him. He looked for it everywhere in his room, in his house, at his friend's house, but the book had simply vanished. Of course, this incident had a big influence on both of them. The influence was so big, in fact, that they decided to write a song about it and later renamed the rock band they played in after this song. The song's title was Black Sabbath. And that is how heavy metal was invented. I hear multiple voices inside my head. I hear voices and there are multiple voices in my head and they all pretend to be my mother, father, sister and brother. I have tried using drugs and other medications but I still hear all of them chatting away with constant digs towards me and what I am doing wrong. My doctor has ran out of options but then recently I decided to stop using medication and I was going to take matters into my own hand. Instead of drugs I decided to use a knife and my car to deal with the voices in my head and I was going to deal with one voice at a time. I first dealt with the voice that was my mother with the car and it successfully took that voice away like a charm. At the same time the voice that was my mother started forgetting her left and rights. When she was ordering me which direction to drive on the road, whenever she said left, in her eye view it looked like I was going right. I guess because I ran her over with my car and she ended up on my windscreen it made our left and rights the opposite of each other. I don't know where she was trying to get me to drive but I just left her somewhere. So one voice in my head had been sorted. The second voice in my head was my father and he was more manly and scary. I dealt with that voice easily with a knife and I felt angry with myself by abusing my body with drugs for years on end to deal with the multiple voices in my head. It was a revelation and with two voices gone from my head I felt more calmer but the voices do leave a heck of a mess for me to clean up. I was now going to use a gun to deal with the last two voices inside my head. Then my head will be clear and silent. Forget burying people in coffins. Fuck using caskets or coffins to bury the dead because when my uncle died, I laid him out for everyone to see. I laid him out in front of my house and everyone saw my dead uncle in my front lawn. The sign read, "Here is my uncle who is now dead." A man like him wouldn't want a coffin to be buried in, but he would want to be showed off to the world and advertised to everyone, and I even carried him on my shoulders and walked around the area shouting, "Here is my dead uncle, the man who used to hide in trees to scare children, the man who used to bite cats' heads off, and the man who used to go around trying to break into people's houses to sell them their own house." I then put my dead uncle on top of my car and drive around the area. He was rotting at this point and the smell stretched out for miles. Children could see it and the faint of heart could feel it. I shouted out of my car, "Here is my uncle who is now dead and who purposely had more children than he could handle so he could watch them all fail at life. Here is my dead uncle who used urinate on the old and have fights with men, women and children. I am not going to put my uncle in a coffin, no, he is going to be carried around until he is just bones. I want everyone to know that my uncle is dead and that he isn't stabbing people anymore. Here is my dead uncle who used to turn into a flesh-eating monster on every full moon and then tried to make people better by making them into like him. Though he always bit them too hard and just started eating them. Here is my dead uncle, and I have shown the people in my area that my uncle is dead. This is the type of funeral I have given my uncle, and not the normal ones where he is docile and still in a coffin and in some depressing room. The type of funeral I gave my uncle is where everyone can see his dead body from all areas. Even blind people could see him. Everyone got to smell him, everyone got to taste him by licking him, and everyone touched him as proof that he is dead. And now that he is rotting away, I will leave him somewhere on some land to feed the earth, as repentance for all the bad deeds he has done during when he was alive.